This happened to my best friend around 2 years ago, whom I'll call Sarah for privacy reasons. We were both studying in the same city, only at different universities, so we were living in different parts of the city. One day, while Sarah was studying for her exams, she realized that there was no food in the fridge, so she decided to go out for a walk and do some grocery shopping. There was a fairly large and well-supplied supermarket close to her apartment complex, where she stopped by for some fruits, yogurts, and noodles. She spent around 15 minutes at the supermarket, only to be greeted by a complete stranger outside who started a small talk with her. He acted like they knew each other, although Sarah is positive she had never seen him before. Overall, my best friend is a very polite and tolerant person, but also very cautious of strangers. She described him as a short, overweight guy with a goatee and a wide, odd grin on his face. On the other hand, my best friend is tall and chubby, so she seems like a girl you should not mess with. She noticed that his fingers were somehow twitching while he spoke, indicating that he was nervous. The guy was at least 35 years old, and my best friend was 23 at the time. Immediately, she realized that something was wrong with this guy. First, he greeted her, saying that he had spotted her in the area before, a couple of times, and then proceeded to ask her on a coffee date at a nearby cafe. Sarah was just standing there speechless and politely declining him, saying she wasn't interested. It made him really mad, so he kept insisting that she should go with him. When she refused again, he angrily told her that they would see each other again soon, calling her by her real name. She was absolutely dumbfounded by this, wondering how on earth this creep had found out her real name. She had no clue who this guy was. He didn't seem like a university student at all, but rather a construction worker, judging by the clothes he was wearing. A bunch of questions came to her mind. She was afraid that she might have been stalked by him, so she threatened to call the police if he didn't just give up his advances and leave her alone. Obviously, my best friend wasn't in the least interested in this creep, but if you think her story ends here, then you're wrong. The next thing she did was part ways with him. He stood in the same spot for a moment, and then as she said, he hopped in his car and started following her a couple blocks down the street, in a dark-colored car with tinted windows. When Sarah realized this, she got even more scared, so she had to take some lesser-known route in order to get to her apartment complex safely. The sun was just starting to set at this point. After some shortcuts, she managed to arrive safely before dark, but she was left feeling paranoid from the whole incident, wondering whether he knew where her apartment was. She never reported the incident to the police, although she vividly remembered his facial features and overall appearance. Fortunately, nothing ever happened after this, and she has not seen a guy since. I really hope it stays so. My advice for everyone is to stay safe out there, because sadly, there are a lot of narcissistic people who can't just take no for an answer. I don't like to talk about this story, because it makes my hair stand up, and it makes me remember the day that it happened, and it scares me to be quite honest. But I feel the need to tell others, whether they believe me or not. One night I was on my computer, which is in my family room, next to the hallway that leads to the bathroom, and then the bedrooms. Located at the end of the hallway is my brother's room and my room. In the middle of the hallway is the bathroom, and at the opening of the hallway was my parents' room. I was home alone, talking to my friend on a voice chat application called Dolby Axon, on the computer. Everything was fine, but my computer started to act up. Everything was slowing down, and when I was searching the internet, it took a while for things to load on the pages I clicked on. I thought nothing of it, because my internet was pretty bad, and this had happened from time to time. My friend's voice started cracking up on the voice chat, so I figured I would just exit the application and just reopen it. When I went to do so, my computer shut off. That's strange, I thought. I took my headset off because while the computer was turning back on, I thought I heard something move or step in the hallway just a few meters away behind me. My dogs were with my parents at their friend's house next door, so it couldn't be them. My brothers were both at work, so it couldn't be them either. I just sat and listened for a bit until I heard it again. I turned to look and began to slowly get out of my chair. I walked towards whatever made that noise in the back rooms of my house. As I did, I began to turn on all the lights in the rooms as I went down the hallway. I saw nothing and returned back to my computer, opened up the chat application, and kept talking to my friend. But I kept the volume low, just in case I heard the footsteps-like noise again. I heard something a few moments later, but not footsteps. It sounded like something was in my bedroom, shutting the light switch off. "Hey Chris, I think I just heard someone shut a light switch off, but no one else is home with me," I said to my friend on the chat. At this point I was already pretty scared when I heard it again, this time closer. Like whatever was in my room moved up to my bathroom. I heard the light switch flick off. This time I told my friend about what was going on, and I was gonna leave the house for a bit to go to my neighbor's house and talk to them about what was going on. He was a bit confused and didn't really believe me, but without trying to convince him, I just left because I heard my parents' room light switch off, and they're the closest to where I was in the family room. When I left the house, I ran down the stairs and up the street to my neighbor's house where my parents were. I told them what was happening, but of course they thought I was imagining all of it and was over-exaggerating the situation. I didn't fight with them about it, but instead just believed them and thought to myself that maybe they were right. Maybe I did just imagine all of that somehow, and maybe it was just my mind playing tricks on me, I thought. Before I walked back down the street and up my stairs, I thought everything would be fine. I really hoped. I opened my front door and walked in, and the lights were all on. I thought, well, I must have really been imagining this. It just seemed so real. I'm a skeptic when it comes to paranormal, but something felt spiritual about what just happened. While trying to convince myself that what I just saw was just my imagination, I could not forget what I had just perceived. The way I heard what I thought was footsteps. Then after investigating the sound and turning on lights, I thought I heard the lights flicking back off, as if someone had just been undoing what I just did. I sat back down in my computer chair, put my headset on, and entered the chat room again. My friend Chris was still there, and the first thing I hear him saying is, Kevin, is that you? Stop messing with me, bro." I asked him, "What are you going on about right now?" And he responded, "That wasn't you? What was that? Are you trying to scare me, bro? Be for real." I replied, "I truly don't know what happened, Chris." He immediately responds, and he sounded terrified. "That wasn't you whispering in the mic?" My heart dropped. "Kevin, you have to get out of your house," Chris said. My stomach twisted. I felt sick to my stomach in fear. "No, that wasn't me," I said quickly. He tried saying something to me again, but all I heard was interference, like what you hear on a radio when you have no signal to a station. I broke down and started to cry. I didn't know any other way to react. I just ran out of my house crying in absolute terror of how this night's events took place. I felt like I had lost hope, and whatever this thing was real. For the first time in my life, I felt I was in danger for something I could not physically fight back against. And the thought horrified me. I had no choice than to believe what happened to me was unexplainable, scary, and potentially real. Luckily, almost that exact moment I fled out of my front door, my parents were just arriving back home. I just embraced my mom with the biggest hug, telling her what happened in a jumble of words, because I was still crying and still scared. We went inside together, and everything was back to normal, like nothing ever happened. The lights were on, so was my computer. When I went on the voice chat, my friend sounded clear again, and was asking me, "That was actually you, right?" He was laughing now, saying, "It was funny prank, I guess, but you have to give up the gig. Seriously, that wasn't you whispering incoherently like that?" I said nothing at all, and thought to myself, my God, this really did happen. We talked for a bit longer, mostly me trying to convince Chris that I was not just pulling some sick prank on him, before shortly after getting ready to go to sleep, and logging off for the night. Shook and fear of what happened rose back to high after he reminds me of that detail though. That whispering really wasn't me, and why did my computer turn off? I recollected in my thoughts. That night laying in my dark room, all I could think about was what just happened to me. I fell asleep. Unfortunately, I began having a nightmare, and it was just a reenactment of what just happened to me, but from a different view. It was like I was watching what happened through the eyes of whatever I believe was tormenting me. I saw it shut off, the lights from my bedroom and my brother's room, then walks in the bathroom. But just before it shuts off the bathroom lights, it looks in a mirror just above the sink. Pale white skin, long black hair, and eyes that were as black as a new moon. I wake up after seeing this, my heart racing out of my chest. At least I got a full night's sleep. I shut my eyes, had this one dream, and it was daytime practically. The dream felt extremely short and vivid oddly. Never have I been so frightened. This night was the worst. 3 years later, here I am. I still live in the same house with my family and pets. Since this night, I have never heard another footstep down my hallway or heard a light shut off on its own. Although I do continue seeing it, that little ghostly girl, that thing, she is in my dreams from time to time, watching. Much less now than before, but she makes it clear she's still there. I don't know her, or its intentions, whatever it is. But I just hope it is here to protect me, or do good, if nothing else. I work as a home inspector in Atlanta, Georgia. I have done more than 1,000 home and building inspections in my time as an inspector. Just for context, the oldest home in the state is located in Savannah, Georgia, about 3 to 4 hours from Atlanta. This house, which is called the Herb House, is claimed to have been built in the 1730s, which does have some skeptics as to why it was really built. I tell you this because as a home inspector, I inspect all sorts of homes. Old, new, decrepit, pristine, and pre-construction. Basically, if it's a home, I can and will inspect it. I work in Atlanta and metro Atlanta areas for the most part, and the oldest home in Atlanta is the Joseph Willis House. It was built in the 1840s and is still located at its original location. The oldest building I've inspected was a church. I don't remember where. It was built in the late 1800s. The home that this story is about was built in the early 1900s in Atlanta. If you're not familiar with crawl spaces beneath houses, then you are lucky. A crawl space is an area under the house that is just dirt, used for things such as storage or placing the water heater or HVAC units. Depending on how well the owners take care of the crawl space, there would be plastic covering the dirt and it would be clean. Most homeowners don't upkeep their crawl spaces and they are covered in spider webs, bugs everywhere, pools of water, and the wood flooring just covered in mold. This particular house that I was inspecting had been sitting empty for quite a while, and the crawl space was full of discarded trash, a very old furnace or boiler, depending on where you're from. This crawl space was also very low. I'm a big guy, and it was tough to crawl around. Some crawl spaces you can stand up in, but most you will be crawling. I was talking to my clients, and they were asking me to check specific things in a crawl space. After they finished, I began to squeeze myself in the fairly small entrance. I am wearing my headlamp, a mask to keep my breathing clean, and what I call a crawl space suit, which is just like a mechanic's jumpsuit. About 6 minutes of crawling around and taking photos and avoiding pools of water, my headlamp goes out. One of the fears I have while crawling around these houses is that the house will shift and pin me under and I will be trapped. So when my light went out, it was complete dark, and in my mind I was anticipating the home crushing me. I tried repeatedly to get the light back on. The stupid thing was constantly doing this at the wrong moments. Over my time doing inspections, I have found a lot of things in weird places. Old soda cans, old shoes, clothing, signs. Most of it is pretty cool, and sometimes people will let me have things. Once I found a cavity in the wall that was only accessible through the attic that was near impossible to navigate, and in this cavity was a giant safe. It was open, and I guessed it was empty. I jumped down about 5 feet and took some photos. It was completely empty, but very old. There was nothing cool or interesting in this particular house that I was slowly and carefully crawling under, or so I thought. My light finally came back on, and there in front of me, washed in my beam of light, was a very old looking stone well. I could have sworn that was not there before. This was a small house, and usually the size of the house directly reflects the size of the crawl space. I could see the entire crawl space from my area. It was surprising that I missed this. I consider myself an explorer, and before I could take a photo of the well, I heard a voice. It said, "Help me." It was very ghostly and faint, and the person sounded very tired. I thought I was just hearing things when I heard, "Help me, I'm in the well, please." I began rapidly crawling towards the well. The area around the well had enough clearance for me to stand on my knees. I glanced over the edge of the well while balancing myself with my hands on the cold, damp stone wall of the well. My light shined down the well that was about 15 feet deep and only 1 foot of water, and there sitting at the bottom of the well is a dark-haired boy in what looks like an old-timey pajamas, clutching on a soaking wet stuffed animal. I couldn't tell what kind of animal it was. It looked so deteriorated. I gasped and said, "How'd you get down there?" All he replied was, "Help me, please." I yelled that I would be right back. I threw my gimp, my headlamp, and used my inspection phone for light to crawl out of there. When I finally squeezed out of the small entrance, the client saw me and chuckled at my filthy appearance and asked me how it looked under there. I yelled at them to call 911. There's a boy in the well under there. They underestimately looked confused, and they had no idea that there was a well under their house. They began to dial, and I ran to my work truck to get my rope. I always have rope with me, ever since I saw that movie, Bandlock Saints, and one of the guys says that you can never have too much rope. I grabbed my length of rope and my extra headlight and ran back to the entrance of the crawl space and dove inside the small opening. I was crawling as fast as I could, while floor joists kept smashing into my back, reminding me that they don't care what's going on. I could hear sirens in the distance, hopefully heading to us. As I said, wherever you are in the crawl space, you can see every area. But what I didn't realize is that all my aggressive crawling has kicked up so much dirt in a space that I couldn't even see a foot in front of me. I couldn't even see where the well was. I called out, "Hey, where are you? Hello?" Just then a very bright light pierced the dust and darkness, and someone called out, "Fire department coming in." 3 firefighters crawl over me with all sorts of rescue equipment asking me where the boy is. I tell them he's in the well. Now 4 people are kicking up dust, and we start making careful movements so that the dust can settle. Once it's settled enough, we all frantically looked for the well. We could see every area in the crawl space, and there was no well. There was no space that you could stand on your knees. There was nothing. I was completely confused. The 4 of us did some thorough investigation of the crawl space before crawling out and finding nothing. I was adamant about seeing that well, and that boy was asking for help. I could remember vividly the feel of the cold, damp stone well wall. I could not explain anything. I couldn't answer any of their questions. The police informed me that I need to be sure of something before I call 911. It was so strange. This was my first paranormal experience, and now I know how others feel and what the true definition of eerie is. Now, every time I enter into a building for an inspection, I apologize to anything that may be there for invading their space, but I will leave shortly. I haven't seen anything since that day, and I hope whoever that was at the bottom of that well finds peace. Maybe all he wanted was my headlamp. I never found it after I tossed it down to him.